Hello everyone, Professor Kruzlik here. So as many of us were going to bed last night, news broke that Lindsey Graham had passed away. This is U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who passed away at the age of 71. So I wanted to make a video kind of about his foreign policy legacy, how his domestic politics has shifted a bit from kind of being an anti-Trumper to being, I don't want to say an anti-Trumper, but critical of Trump initially, to being quite an ally of the Trump administration. However, his foreign policy hasn't really evolved over time. So I wanted to make a video kind of tying these things together. And then something that I saw last night already spreading, and then this morning some rather what I consider conspiracy theories about his death. So according to Graham's office, he died following a brief and sudden illness. This is what was reported last night, and I see this morning it is still what's being reported: a brief and sudden illness. His death, though, did occur shortly after his return from Kyiv, Ukraine, where he had met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So these sequences of events has already, as I said in the introduction, produced a considerable amount of speculation online about his death, from some maybe more fringe elements of the internet, but also some mainstream Russia analysts, some mainstream foreign policy analysts who maybe don't oftentimes partake in speculation or conspiracy theories, highlighting maybe some odd timing of his death. So I wanted to just make a video with these two things together, and we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to start with Graham's documented foreign policy legacy. So this morning we're seeing a lot of remembrances for Lindsey Graham from both sides of the political aisle. Many elected Democrats, formerly elected Democrats who worked with Graham, are putting out statements and solidarity with his family and sympathy towards his family. So when we think of Graham's foreign policy, we could describe it as like Republican internationalism. Definitely a strong interventionist orientation. So this morning, if you're maybe reading about Graham's legacy, or maybe watching some YouTube videos about Graham, if they're from maybe a left persuasion, they're very critical of Graham, and they're saying that he has been a pro-hawk senator, pro-intervention, pro-military senator. And this is rooted in his ideology of a strong interventionist, strong military foreign policy. And really, for more than 2 decades, he has argued that American security depended upon military strength, forward engagement of the military around the world, sometimes international alliances, and importantly, a demonstrated willingness to confront adversaries abroad. And this can be through military means. He was closely associated with other interventionists like John McCain or Democrat Joe Lieberman. And these three people were frequently called the Three Amigos because they traveled extensively and advocated for an assertive American foreign policy and a sort of foreign policy role in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in other international conflicts. So Graham frequently described himself as a Reagan Republican, and that label captured really part of his outlook: strong defense spending, confidence in American leadership, and hostile towards authoritarian adversaries. But his worldview was also, like many foreign policy makers, shaped by the post September 11th era. He supported the war in Iraq. He favored an extended American military presence in Iraq and Afghanistan, advocated for forceful foreign policies towards Iraq, Afghanistan, as well as Iran. You could, if you've watched videos of Graham over the past month or 2 months, he has spoken about a strong, assertive American foreign policy towards Iran, about maybe reinitiating strikes against Iran. So when we think about this from like a foreign political science foreign policy view, definitely more on the interventionist wing of the Republican Party, rather than maybe a realist scholar, realist foreign policy makers, which the Trump administration has a lot of. But Graham was a close ally to Trump, but still argued for this much more interventionist foreign policy. So when we think about one of the most notable features of Graham's career was the contrast between, like we said at the outset, his changing domestic political alliances and kind of his same old consistent foreign policy views. So as we said at the outset, in 2016, 2015, Graham was quite critical of Donald Trump, quite critical that if the Republicans give power to Donald Trump, it would blow up in their face. And this, of course, has evolved over time. Graham has really transitioned, into one of Trump's closest allies. On the foreign policy side, though, much more of a continuation. Those views he had for Iraq, Afghanistan have stayed relatively the same with Iran. Again, still a very interventionist perspective. So, as I was thinking about how to talk about this today, what I wanted to think about was Graham's view on Ukraine and Russia. So, over the past couple of days, I think I forget if Graham's official Twitter account, or at least a photo floated around of Graham holding drones in Ukraine. So Lindsey Graham, has been a huge supporter of Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine, a huge supporter of putting sanctions on Putin and the Russian authorities, a huge supporter of making sure that the Ukrainians won the war. So Graham has become, and he did become, one of Ukraine's most visible and vocal supporters in Congress. He visited Ukraine over 10 times, really just since the February 2022 invasion. He consistently promoted military assistance, air defense support, and, like I said, stronger sanctions against Russian authorities. So when we think of Graham's legacy, he has had a commitment to Ukraine. His commitment to Ukraine has been unwavering. And with him just being in Kyiv, the capital, a couple days ago, and then dying shortly after, this is where maybe some of those conspiracy theories, or at least online speculation, because I don't want to say everything's a conspiracy theory, but at least online speculation has emerged. This proximity of events and his continued support for Ukraine has triggered some speculation, conspiracy theories, online. We know that Graham had made some powerful enemies, of course. Russia had placed him in 2023 on a wanted list following controversial remarks he made during an earlier visit to Ukraine. So in 2024, Iranian leaders had made comments about Graham, about calling him an extremist. So we see that Graham, of course, has made enemies. And where maybe some of the speculation comes in, and if you're on social media, I'm sure you're seeing some of this float around, like I said at the outset, sometimes by some pretty reputable Russian analysts who aren't coming out and saying it, but maybe hinting at, oh, maybe the Russians had something to do with this. Maybe Graham was poisoned or something, somehow the Russians were involved. There's also a little bit of fuel for the speculation when Kash Patel came out and said that the FBI was going to fully support the investigation and fully support the resources of the FBI were there to get to the bottom of what happened. So some folks took that as, oh, maybe something nefarious has happened with Lindsey Graham, and it wasn't just this sudden illness that caused him to pass away. So we see a lot of speculation. Well, was it the Russians? Did they poison Lindsey Graham? Was it the Iranians? Did they poison Lindsey Graham? It's important to know that here at the outset, it's only like the day after, but there isn't any evidence out there that any foreign adversary had anything to do with Graham's death. But how quickly these two events. Graham comes home from Ukraine. He's a big supporter of the Ukrainians. He's a big advocate for continuing to support the Ukrainians. And then his death. So we can see that speculation online, but we oftentimes see speculation about everything. Conspiracy theories grow out of a lot. So the big takeaway, and what I've been thinking about over the past few hours, is Graham's lasting legacy for foreign policy is one of intervention. In an era where many people in the Republican Party, and Democrats of course, but Graham was a Republican, but many people in the Republican Party have maybe moved away from that more interventionist wing of the party. When we think of MAGA, when we think of the populist movements on both sides of the political spectrum, they have moved away from this more interventionist foreign policy. Graham had not. He had stayed in that camp of wanting a firmer, stronger, more assertive foreign policy. And then with his death, of course, we are seeing speculation and conspiracy theories run online. So lots out there about Graham's death. I just wanted to kind of think about his lasting legacy with Ukraine, because he was an advocate for arming the Ukrainians, continuously helping the Ukrainians in their fight against Russia.